with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association.
Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders. And Chuck, this is the season for the Insiders. We're working on the state budget here. And I think time is really running out on the ability to do some sort of shared revenue deal as part of the state budget. Do you think they'll get it done?
I think they will. Obviously, the Republicans have been shorting municipalities across the state. You heard even the League of Municipalities say that they've been doing that. But with Milwaukee, it's desperate times. They have faced potential bankruptcy. I think at the end of the day, the compromise that will be struck, other than I think there won't really be the kind of money that they should have, but I think the compromise that will be struck is that they will have the electeds of Milwaukee County and the city of Milwaukee vote on anything that has to happen over there. It will not be a referendum. Why do I say that? I think that even the Republicans in the legislature will ultimately understand that they cannot afford to force these guys into bankruptcy. And if they leave this to a vote of the electorate, that could happen. And yet they'll want to hold the feet to the fire of people who are voting for it. And so if I think, and I would agree with this, if I'm a Republican voting for this and authorizing another tax, the least I'm going to want is the elected officials in Milwaukee County or the city of Milwaukee to take responsibility and vote for that as well. But I think the Robin Vos position saying, oh, we're going to put it to the electorate, that's a prescription for potential disaster and for impacting not only Milwaukee's credit rating, but for any city across Wisconsin, because people at the national level will say, what's going on?
Well, this reminds me of the famous question the poet Yeats asked, can the center hold? I see the right on the Republican side saying, hey, wait a minute, why are we making it easier for local governments to raise taxes and spending? And I see people on the left saying, well, wait, while you're at it, can Milwaukee County have another penny on top of the one that you're proposing? Or Milwaukee City, I really think that they need to get this done soon. I hope that will force people to get to an answer on it relatively soon. I'm afraid that the easier answer is to increase shared revenue rather than to give local governments additional authorities. That's the opposite of what I started out with thinking on this, but it's easier to spend a surplus, I think, than it is to apparently resolve the difference between the Assembly and the state Senate about who should have to approve that tax increase at the local government level. Perhaps you're right, it will in the end, it will just be the local government officials, but time is running out here, and both the left and the right are nibbling at this deal. The left saying it's not enough money, and the right saying, why would we possibly give local governments the ability to raise more taxes?
Scott just raised the really important question. What's odd here is that it used to be it was Robin Vos versus the governor, and the Senate would come along. Now we've got this situation where the Senate actually wants to do something different than Robin Vos. And so you actually have Evers and the Senate more allied than you do with Vos, because Vos is insisting upon a vote of the people on this, and he knows that could drive them into bankruptcy, and that could have devastating consequences across the state of Wisconsin that we might cause something like this. I don't think that's where they'll end up. It is interesting that the middle sometimes is the Senate, because it's a body with people who represent broader constituencies, and they've been around longer in the legislature. That's why we call our house the upper house, Scott. But I do think that but I do believe that Robin Vos is taking a position here, which I think is a negotiated position, but very dangerous, not only for Milwaukee, but for the state of Wisconsin.
I think it's an interesting argument you're making that the elected officials are more responsible than the voters. For crying out loud, we can't leave the decision up to the voters. They'll take us right into bankruptcy. The reason Milwaukee's in this horrible position at the moment, and that the rest of the state's whole effort to try to figure out new revenue sources in the shared revenue system is on hold, is that Milwaukee didn't pay its pension payments for 4 years. There was all sorts of irresponsible decisions that were made over decades in Milwaukee City and County, and now the rest of the state is sort of being made to pay for that. And I think there's some resentment from people.
Well, and I think there are things that have to be done. For example, Milwaukee has to be in the state retirement system. if they're in the state retirement system, they cannot put these things off. So there are definitely remedies that have to be there. But you can't put people into a situation where you can't put a municipality into a situation where a vote which is beyond their control could push them into bankruptcy, especially when you have a $7 billion surplus. Remember, this doesn't just impact Milwaukee. Not only are, of course, all the infrastructure and the police and fire services important to all the rest of us when we go to Milwaukee, but in addition to that, you are putting in a situation out there where the ratings agencies, the national entities will say, oh, Wisconsin's willing to let its biggest municipality go bankrupt. How many others out there could be a problem? That is not the kind of thing we want to do as a state. It's bigger than getting a vote of the people to say this is going to be democracy. There are a lot of other things that may be implications that could be really devastating for our state, even beyond Milwaukee.
I will say this. I mean, right now it sort of feels like it's one of those action television shows where there's a countdown on the clock. There's only a few hours left for the finance committee to resolve this whole matter, but actually they can just set some money aside and spend time working on this over the course of the summer and do something in the fall, as long as they set the money aside now. Otherwise, the money is the grease that's going to make this deal eventually happen.
Yeah, there's a lot to go on here, but this is really important that they get this right. It's a fundamental question. And I'm concerned that they're not moving in the right direction at this time.
We will see.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association